the one that started it all. Like, the vast, vast, vast majority of these Mandela effect supposed manifestations are, just people sort of like misremembering tiny details about cartoon characters or brand logos or things like that. There's very few examples of people misremembering something at a kind of spectacular level. The example, I made a video about this on my own YouTube channel, and the example I give is that, a Mandela effect, quote unquote, would be like people slightly misremembering how like the Coca-Cola logo looks, right? But
Right.
nobody would say something like, oh, I have a memory of Coca-Cola being like a blue type of, pineapple juice, right? Like it's never at that level, which means that it's a pretty easily explainable phenomenon. If you did have a sort of mass phenomenon of a lot of people having dramatically at odds memories of extremely mainstream things, such as like, what is Coca-Cola? Who is the president of the United States? How does rain work? Things like that. Then I would perhaps be willing to give it a little bit more time. But since it only manifests at this extraordinarily trivial level, I think that the Occam's razor explanation is just that people are misremembering stupid, petty things incorrectly because it's just not something that's worth devoting that much brain space to.
Okay, I got you. So then when you say like a mass amount of people, so with these Mandela effects, it is a mass amount of people, you know what I'm saying? Like it's like tens of thousands of people that remember something a totally different way than it was.
But it's such a tiny,
A
tiny,
tiny thing,
trivial
right?
thing.
Okay.
It's not an important thing, and it's like you can pick anything in the world and you'll have tons and tons of people misremembering it if it's trivial enough to not be worth remembering, right? Like people getting, movie quotes slightly wrong is to me not a particularly fascinating or compelling social phenomenon because it's a completely understandable thing. We all go through life, not paying obsessive attention to things that we don't deem deserving of our focused attention. So the fact that people would, get some of these sort of things or sort of like half remember or misremember trivial information is, easily explainable by the fact that that's what we do with information that is by definition trivial.
Okay, I got you. So then, in that sense, I 100% get what you're saying, and I wanted to bring up the whole thing too because I watched your whole video about parallel universes and your thoughts on that too.
Well, I mean, it's
Same thing,
preposterous,
right?
right?
Okay.
Like it's no, I mean, it's obviously like a ridiculous over determined explanation for something that has such a blindingly self-obvious real world explanation. And to me, that's, I don't know, like that's a sort of symptom of, I suppose, the unseriousness of our age and the unseriousness of internet culture and the way that, like, I think a lot of people are sort of getting kind of corrupted by the sort of lunatic misinformation and conspiracy theories. So it's not even particularly charming to me. I mean, I see it as something that's quite dark and upsetting.
So do you believe in parallel universes or you don't?
No, of course I don't. It's a
Okay.
preposterous sort of theory.
Okay. So now another question I had is this is one my subscribers, quote unquote, wanted to ask is if like have you ever like seen a quote unquote Mandela effect, obviously, that kind of just like blew you away, even though you don't believe in them in a sense?
No, I mean, it never blows me away because they never manifest at a level that's truly impressive. It's just kind of like you hear it and you're like, oh, huh, well, I guess I was wrong about that. Like I saw someone posting this on Instagram the other day and it was like, do you remember there being a sort of like a burglar emoji, like a little burglar with a bag and, wearing a stripy shirt with like a mask on his face, like the Hamburglar. And it's
Right.
like, that never existed. Welcome to Mandela effect. And it's like, okay, like I thought that there was that emoji, but I guess I was wrong. Like I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of emojis. So, I could sort of shrug it off and be like, huh, that's interesting. I guess I was wrong about that. But my instinct is to not think that this is some wildly fascinating social phenomenon deserving of like, all of this time and attention. It makes sense that that might be something that I just, didn't follow that carefully and thus would have a sort of false memory of.
So I was actually going to bring up the robber emoji when I was going to ask you about the Mandela effects, like I mentioned earlier. The whole
Yeah.
thing about the phenomenon and stuff is that a lot of people remember the robber emoji, yet there never was one. So how does it happen to the fact where so many people remember something and it's not just one person, it's like tens of thousands, hundreds of
Well,
thousands, but it was never there.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
we all
So,
have the same like image of that robber emoji.
yeah, but I mean, like, how many emojis are there, my friend? Like, there's dozens and dozens of emojis of every like stereotypical profession and sort of the human archetype. There's like, I can't even say like off the top of my head, like, is there an astronaut emoji? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if there was, but I could also believe that there might not be one. Like, I might, like, right now, you and I could probably imagine what an astronaut emoji might look like, but could we say with gun to our head certainty that that emoji actually exists or not? No, because we haven't bothered to devote that much mind space to something so trivial. So it's like there's lots of things that you can accept the premise that that thing might exist and it might look a certain way, and you can sort of apply this to any number of logos, cartoon characters, movie quotations. The list goes on and on and on. But it's ultimately not important information, and that's why we can have sort of misrememberings of it, or false memories of it, or whatever sort of like exaggerated sort of lofty title you want to give to it. But at the end of the day, it is just not important information, and that's why our brain does not store it accurately, if at all.
Okay, I completely get what you're saying to the point.
Well, why don't you agree with me, my friend? Like, what am I saying that?
Okay, because the Mandela effect is a theory, right? It's a theory that even though you could bring up these statistics and these facts, you can't really prove it to be right or wrong. Just like gravity, gravity is just a theory. It's the relative theory, but it's still just a theory. It's not a fact because they can't prove how
my
gravity
friend,
works.
So can I cut you off here for a second? How old are you?
I am
How
20. I'm 20.
So you're a young man, right? I'm 36, right?
Yeah, no
And it's
problem.
like, it's important that, as you go through life and as you become a sort of mature person, that you engage with the world as it actually exists. And you sort of not allow yourself to go down these like ridiculous rabbit holes of entertaining sort of preposterous pseudoscience, right? Because it's ultimately not going to lead to a good place. We've seen these sort of, these riots in the Capitol buildings sort of launched by people who have allowed their brains to become like basically rotted by misinformation, by pseudoscience, by crackpot conspiracy theories. And when I talk to young people like you, it really troubles me that like a lot of you guys are sort of getting into this stuff, like spending so much time online and getting so into stuff that is just absolute nonsense. And it's like, I would hope that you sound like an intelligent young man, that you would realize that at some level, this is just nonsense. Like, this is preposterous. There are so many more important things that you as a young man could be filling your life with, rather than entertaining or even having a conversation with somebody like me about a concept as obviously stupid and pointless and just a product of like idiots on the internet who have too much time on their hand and have thus woven a simple phenomenon of people misremembering trivial nonsense into some like grand phenomenon of parallel universes or whatever. So like, I would hope that you have at least some, I'm not trying to beat up on you specifically, but it's just like, this is a phenomenon of internet culture, of young people, that I think really has a very sinister dark side, and that it's important that people be able to sort of pull themselves from the brink of it before they start spiraling deeper and deeper and deeper into other more sinister, more nefarious forms of conspiratorial thinking and pseudoscience and the rest of it.
I gotcha. And then to bring up the whole political thing, I hate political shit. Like this QAnon, this riots, I fucking think it's stupid. So
yeah, but you can see how it's.
I just think that's completely stupid. More with the Mandela effect.
It's part of the same phenomenon, right? It's part of the same phenomenon, right? Like, I would want you to understand that, right? Like, once you start going down the path of entertaining crap like the Mandela effect, it can easily lead to stuff like QAnon if you're not careful, because it's all based on the premise of rejecting objective truth, of rejecting like objective evidence, and sort of empirical science and data and all of this other kind of stuff, Occam's razor logic and all the rest of it. It's about sacrificing all of that in favor of conspiratorial thinking. And that is dangerous. And that is why, like I said, like Mandela effect and sort of having conversations like this, it's not a purely innocent thing. It can be quite sinister.
Okay. I could agree on your logic right there. I'm not doing this in order to, I just think, like you said, in entertainment purposes, it just kind of makes you think of the world as like a mysterious place in a sense, if you get what I'm saying. So I'm not trying to, how do I say it?
You're not trying to do anything, but that's part of the problem, right?
Okay.
It's that like, if you're not careful, if you don't sort of think if you don't think about sort of like the consequences where this type of thinking can lead, right? That's sort of my point. Is it's this type of thinking, this